Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We'll start the webinar properly in about a minute. Just let everyone come in. People are joining very, very quickly at the moment from all over the world. Lots of people from East Africa, I see, from Europe, and from North America. Yes. Welcome, everyone. This may set a record for one of the most internationally diverse webinars that we've ever hosted. Very exciting. All right, just a few more seconds and then I'm going to get things started because we have a lot to go through. Okay, let's begin. Welcome everyone to this webinar on barriers and opportunities for disability inclusive financial services and entrepreneurship. My name's Sam Mendelson. I'm financial inclusion specialist at e-MFP, for whom this is a really important topic. So we were delighted when our old friends and member Grameen Foundation reached out and asked if we would host it. We jumped at the chance. It was a bit over a year ago that we signed an MOU with Barrier Free Finance Initiative via the Global Disability Summit as part of a commitment that we would try to give more exposure and impetus on this area of disability inclusive finance. And we had a webinar last year and then an event within our annual conference at the end of the year. Who is we? We as e-MFP, we are a network of organizations and individuals that work in the financial inclusion sector. We foster activities that include increase global access to affordable, quality, sustainable, and inclusive financial services. I'd like to very briefly welcome and thank all the panelists that have joined today. It's Alison from Barrier Free Finance Initiative, Bindi from Grameen Foundation, and Bobby, Ambrose from NUDIPU, and Oyuki, Margaret from OBL, Opportunity Bank Uganda, and Martin from Centenary Bank. A little bit of housekeeping. We really do welcome Q, and first thing is that it will be recorded. The webinar is being recorded. The second thing is you will see that there is both a chat, but hopefully you can also see a Q&A at the bottom. If you would like to just chat to other people that are there, by all means use the chat. But if you have questions to any of the panelists on anything, please use the Q&A. We will either address them in writing or orally towards the end of the session. Please, where possible, be as direct as you can. So to whom is the question directed? There are lots of moving parts, so I'm going to hand off here in just a minute. But first, we're going to have 3 quick polls to get everyone thinking. Before we do that, if you next slide, please. Can I control it? Or is it? Thank you very much. So a little bit about background. Then the Bindi is going to talk about the assessment that was conducted in Uganda and the methodology. Then the next section will be on disability inclusive entrepreneurship. Then barriers and facilitators to disability inclusive financial services. And then there's going to be a roundtable discussion moderated by Bobby in the last third that will include plenty of opportunity for audience Q&A. Before that, we're going to do 3 quick polls. And then I'm not going to give the answer to them. I'm going to let Bindi talk a little about what the actual correct answer to each is. So first poll, please, Fernando, if you don't mind. So we would like you to estimate, if you can, what percentage of people globally live with a disability. Is it around 6%, 10%, 16, or 22? We'll just leave this up for about 15 or 20 seconds. Shouldn't take too long. So what percentage of people live globally with a disability? Is it 6, 10, 16, or 22%? A few more seconds. And that's fine. Thanks. That's enough, I think. We can end the poll there, Fernando, and then let's have the second question.
Do we share the results now?
Sorry. You can share the results. Is that the plurality there? Actually, a majority said around 16%. Okay. And now let's have the second one, which is on the economic impact of disability inclusive insurance. We
Okay.
What do you estimate is the potential impact of including people with disabilities in the global economy? Is it increase global GDP by 0.5 to 2%, increase 10 to 15, as you can see, these aren't in ascending order, increase by 3 to 7, increase by 2 to 3, or decrease by 1%? So again, leave this up for about 20 or so seconds. So is it increase by 0.5 to 2, 3 to 7, 2 to 3, 10 to 15, or decrease by 1? Okay, we've got 60% of people participated. Just give it a few more seconds. Okay, let's close it there. Thanks, Fernando. And show the results. And I can tell you that 42%, so a plurality, said 3 to 7%. Okay, and thank you very much. And then the last poll. And then I'm going to hand over to Bindi, and we'll be able to tell you if you're right. Poll number 3 is perceived barriers. And the question is, well, I'll read until it comes up. I'll just read it out. What is the most commonly reported barrier to the use of financial services among people with disabilities? So what do people with disabilities report as the biggest barrier to the use of financial services? Fernando, everything okay?
Yes.
It's is it up?
Almost.
Did I miss it?
It's showing. Yeah, people are answering now.
Oh,
It's
they are. Sorry. Oh, I must have sorry. I must have closed it by mistake. Okay.
yeah.
Tell me when we've
We have 60%
okay,
people.
then let's close it and share the results. Thank you.
Okay.
There we are. And so we've got a majority, almost a majority says mistrust. Well, Bindi, I think that's a pretty nice way to segue over to you because I think they've done very, very well. So I'm going to hand over to Bindi from Grameen Foundation now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so here are your poll answers, and this is really a discussion about why are we here today? Why are we talking about the economic inclusion of people with disabilities, and why does it matter? So first, as you guys guessed or knew, a lot of people in the world live with disabilities, and this number is only going to grow as the global population ages. So an estimated 16% of people globally currently live with a disability, and that's over 1 billion people. And the World Bank estimates that excluding people with disabilities from the economy diminishes global GDP by 3 to 7%, so it causes a huge economic impact. At the same time, over 13% of the population in Uganda alone live with some form of disability, and women and rural people are more likely than men and urban residents to have a disability. So at the same time, roughly 80% of people with disabilities live in the global south. So this is why it really matters for development actors. And finally, just from a basic human rights perspective, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities recognizes the right of every person to work, and that includes people with disabilities. So this is really why the economic inclusion of people with disabilities matter. Bobby, can you go to the next slide? Okay, great. So now that we understand why this is important, let's talk a bit about the assessment that we did in Uganda. So basically, the assessment was conducted by Grameen Foundation and NUDIPU together, and we aim to identify promising entry points and practical recommendations for organizations of people with disabilities, NGOs, government, and financial institutions that were seeking to meaningfully advance livelihoods and financial inclusion for people with disabilities. And next slide. Yeah. So researchers conducted focus group discussions with over 200 people with disabilities across northern, western, and central Uganda, and held expert interviews with 20 different organizations working in the disability inclusion space. So we talked to a lot of different people. And the questions that we wanted to answer were, first, which value chains and livelihoods are people with disabilities most likely to succeed in? Next, what barriers prevent people with disabilities, especially women and youth, from starting and growing successful businesses? Next, we wanted to understand from a financial inclusion perspective, what are the demand side barriers that prevent people with disabilities, especially women and youth, from accessing and adopting financial services? Then on the other side, from the financial institution perspective, what are the supply side barriers that prevent financial institutions from offering services to people with disabilities and serving them in the way that we want them to? Finally, we wanted to understand or develop some practical recommendations for financial institutions, NGOs, organizations of people with disabilities, and government actors who want to better serve the people with disabilities market. And I want to say just briefly that as much as possible, we were trying to understand barriers and opportunities from a very holistic 360-degree perspective. We didn't want to just talk about lack of training and lack of knowledge. We wanted to look at the material, social, gender, and gender-based violence barriers that might prevent people from people with disabilities from succeeding in business. So let's go ahead and get started and look at our findings. First, we're going to look at the barriers and opportunities to advance disability inclusive entrepreneurship. Let's start with the barriers. So these are the most significant barriers that we identified in our assessment, and there are even more barriers in the report if you read the report. First, the number one most important barrier that people cited was limited access to finance for business growth. Next, people talked about limited access to land, and this is driven by overall land scarcity in Uganda, as well as discrimination in land inheritance practices. People are less likely to hand down their land to their relatives, their sons and daughters who are disabled, because they believe that they cannot succeed in business. There's also communication barriers. So people with hearing and visual impairments have challenges interacting with customers and business suppliers and financial institutions. And they also face barriers to participating in business trainings. Next are physical and mobility barriers. So obviously people with limited mobility find it difficult to access faraway markets and business development services. At the same time, people with physical disabilities may not be able to operate businesses like agricultural businesses that involve significant physical labor. So next is widespread stigma and discrimination against people with disabilities. There is a pervasive level of stigma within society and discrimination against people with disabilities. So people have the assumption that people with disabilities cannot succeed in business. At the same time, there are widely held beliefs that people with disabilities may be cursed, and interacting with them will negatively affect you. And so all of these things limit the business opportunities available to people with disabilities, limit their access to finance, and prevent them or lead to exclusion from business and technical trainings. Finally, limited access to assistive technologies. So assistive technologies like wheelchairs, tricycles, screen readers, specially designed farm tools can all be really great game changers that open up opportunities for people with disabilities, but they're very scarce in Uganda due to high costs, limited local supply, and limited digital literacy to use digital tools like a screen reader. So those are some of the most important barriers to entrepreneurship for people with disabilities generally. Now let's look at the specific barriers that women and youth with disabilities face. First of all, women with disabilities are likely to have very limited family support from their husbands and relatives for their livelihoods, and that really, creates a huge barrier for them. Next is social isolation. So we all remember from our experience with COVID that social isolation can be extremely detrimental. It can reduce your networks, reduce your opportunities available to you, reduce your confidence, and give you increased anxiety. So women with disabilities are very likely to be socially isolated because their spouses might fear them going outside of the house. They'll worry that if the women go outside of the house, they'll be robbed or sexually assaulted. And so they don't let them out of the house unaccompanied. Next is gender-based violence. Women with disabilities face physical abuse and even financial abuse from their spouses, where spouses are trying to take away women's earnings to use them for other purposes. And women with disabilities also experience sexual abuse from other people in the community. Next is heavy household workloads. And of course, this happens to all women. So heavy household workloads limit the time available to engage in business. Next, with the youth that we talked with, they had some specific barriers. First, they noted that they have limited business and financial management skills. So this isn't surprising because they're young and they may not have had an opportunity to participate in any kind of technical trainings. Finally, youth noted that they lack business mentors who can guide them and provide them advice on their businesses. So those are the barriers that people face. Next, let's look at some practical recommendations for all of us to advance entrepreneurship for people with disabilities. So our first recommendation is for organizations across the board to promote high potential value chains and livelihoods that have lower barriers to entry for people with specific disabilities. So we recognize that a person with disability can participate in any value chain that they choose, but we also recognize that they have specific barriers like limited land holdings, physical movement, lack of startup capital, and generalized poverty. So we want to promote value chains that do not require significant land, physical movement, or startup capital, and have the potential to produce a regular daily or weekly income. So some of the value chains that we identified were like poultry, piggery, vegetable trading, handicrafts, all of those. And you can see all the value chains that we recommended in our report. Next, we recommend that all organizations make an effort to design truly disability inclusive programs. So what is a disability inclusive program? An inclusive program is going to involve people with disabilities and organizations of persons with disabilities in both project design and implementation. It's going to leverage gender and social inclusion analysis to identify potential barriers to participation in the program and address these barriers in project design. And finally, it's going to include a very well-designed safeguarding plan that recognizes the risks and potential unintended consequences of entrepreneurship programs for people with disabilities and addresses those. Next is to design inclusive financial products and delivery channels. This is for the financial institutions. Financial institutions should work to design more inclusive products and delivery channels that respond to the needs, preferences, and constraints of people with disabilities. So you're going to see all about that, about the financial services side later on in our presentation. And I'll skip to the next practical recommendations. So our next recommendation is for organizations to address social stigma and negative stereotypes and biases against people with disabilities at all levels. And so this is really through awareness raising, both at the community level, at the government level, at the financial institution level, even at your own NGO level. You need to address those internal biases that prevent people from engaging respectfully and fully with people with disabilities. Next is to provide people with disabilities business and technical training that's practical, accessible, and tailored to their situations. So what do we mean by this? So accessible business training is going to be conducted in brief sessions that the people with disabilities can join. And they're, it doesn't, if people have certain physical disabilities, they might be tired out from the training earlier. They may have to go home earlier than other people that you're used to working with. So make the training sessions more brief. Include communication support, so hearing and visually impaired people can, fully understand everything that's happening with the training. Next, make sure the training is really practical and tailored to people with disabilities situation. So you want to talk about some of the challenges that a person with disabilities may face when operating their business and offer practical solutions. And there's more suggestions and recommendations in the report again. Next, we think it's really important to promote the integration and inclusion of people with disabilities in business and community networks. So we're talking about integrating people with disabilities directly into existing farmers groups, savings groups, business associations, and SACCOs. And that way you're immediately going to increase their access to services while also reducing social isolation. Finally, we want to increase access to assistive technologies And this can be done by promoting local manufacturers within Uganda, digital literacy training, and linking people with disabilities to subsidy programs that might exist for those technologies. I'll stop there. I hope I haven't talked so quickly. And I'll hand over to Ambrose for our
Before
next
you,
section.
sorry, Bindi,
Yeah.
before you do, there's a question in the Q&A that might be a good time now to ask it because it's on methodology.
Right.
So it's from Astrid, and it says, thanks. You looked at the supply and demand side. Did you also look at the regulatory side? And what is the role played by the central bank to encourage inclusive access and use of DFS in Uganda? So I don't know if you want to take that, or we could deal with it later.
I think I'll say very briefly that this was not, this wasn't an in-depth assessment. This was more of a rapid assessment to identify those entry points at the beginning. And definitely, as you're designing a program, you would want to do more in-depth research into regulatory barriers and regulatory facilitators to financial access for people with disabilities. And I think that obviously we did this assessment in Uganda, but it could be replicated in other countries.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we move on then, Bindi?
Yep.
After you.
So Ambrose is going to pick up.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining this webinar. My name is Orko Ambrose, Program Officer, working with the National Union of Disabilities of Uganda. And so I'm going to take you through the barriers and opportunities to advance financial inclusion for people with disabilities as per the assessment. People with disabilities are clearly interested in accessing formal financial services for business growth, but they face numerous barriers to both accessing and using financial services successfully. And the most frequently cited demand-side barriers that limit people with disabilities from using financial services, as per the findings, the high service fees, bank charges, interest payments, and some of the fees within the support staff within the community. Then long distance and high transport costs to financial service provider branches, particularly for people with disabilities in rural areas, because most of the persons with disabilities are situated in the rural setting, and accessing these branches which are situated in the urban areas is quite difficult. A communication barrier, including lack of sign language interpreters at the financial service provider branches, language barrier, and low literacy among the members with disabilities. This is particularly true for hearing and visually impaired individuals within the community. Stigma on discriminatory attitudes by the financial service provider staff are the major challenges, discouraging people with disabilities from seeking services and making it harder qualify for financial services when they do seek them. As one of the respondents noted that the financial service provider staff who one may think are educated also think disability is a curse and don't want to come near them. So you can see that from the participants' response, and this typically leaves out many of persons with disability. In the case of a scenario is that you may realize that a person with visual impairment cannot be allowed to open even more than one account in the financial institution. Then also limited awareness of financial services available within the reach of persons with disability. Many people with disabilities are simply not aware of the formal financial services available in their areas. Can move to the next. Then the other side of it is the most significant supply side barriers to financial inclusion on the side of the financial institutions. The communication barrier stood out, and most of the financial service providers lack the sign language interpreters, accessible information materials, and application needed to communicate with hearing and visually impaired clients, because mostly those with hearing impairment need, at least if they can have a form to fill in with braille information, that would be so great for them. Lack of accessible infrastructures for financial service providers, like ramps, budgeting for long service time for clients with disabilities, accessible ATMs, among others, and you realize that they need funds to invest in this so that they can bring it at the level of each and everyone, especially for persons with disability. So stigma also still surfaces in this finding. Frontline financial service provider staff often they have negative perception of people with disabilities, viewing them as high risk and incapable of loan repayment. A lack of training on how to serve people with disabilities, clients, including how to interact effectively and respectively with people with disabilities is key, and limited market information on the size, businesses, activities, and cash flows that need a reference for financial service and repayment ability of people with disabilities, that they don't have all these capacities that can link them to the form of financial services. Next. So one of the most important steps to advancing financial inclusion for people with disabilities is obviously providing financial products that they need and want. Our assessment found out that people with disabilities demand financial products that support business growth, and products protect against unforeseen disasters. Specifically, they are seeking business loans, formal account opening, as you can see with the percentages, and digital financial services like the digital loans, and many also demand agriculture loans and education loans, while medical insurance, emergency loans, and insurance were mentioned by a few respondents. Can move on. Here are some of the most practical recommendations to advance financial inclusion for people with disabilities. And these recommendations are for NGOs and organizations for persons with disabilities, as well as the government and financial institutions. The most outstanding one is modify existing financial products to be more disability inclusive, or design tailored loan products for people with disabilities, where many respondents recommended developing tailored loan products with reduced terms and conditions following universal design principles. One can also recommend making existing financial products more accessible for people with disabilities. Also promote digital financial service channels and platforms and make sure they are accessible for example, mobile money agent backing, mobile money backing, and digital loans. Further, strengthen the capacity of financial service provider staff to serve people with disabilities, and this includes both skills building and transforming attitudes and biases, because these are the most barriers that affect persons with disabilities, and also the financial service provider towards serving persons with disabilities. Also, partner with the Organization of Persons with Disability to raise awareness of financial services and identify potential clients. That's to say, Organization of Persons with Disabilities have networks and trust with people with disabilities, so that financial service providers can leverage all. Next, address communication barriers, whereby engaging sign language interpreters, using braille forms and other approaches that suit for inclusive financial service. Offer a range of financial products and services that meet diverse needs and financial capacity of persons with disabilities, ranging from financial literacy training to saving group training, to bank account and micro loans, to small and medium enterprise loans. So lastly, promote group financial products and asset loans specifically. For group financial products like the village saving and loan association saving accounts and group loans at the bank and microfinance institutions to bridge the gap from informal to formal financial services. So assets to help people access productive assets is also very, asset loan is very key. Yeah, thank you so much. That's all we had from the findings. Over to you, Moderator.
Great, thank you, Martin. Now we're going to move into a quick roundtable discussion. So I would like for my co-panelists to go ahead and turn their videos on if you can. I'm Bobby Gray. I'm the Associate Vice President of Programs at Grameen Foundation, and I'm joined today. You've heard Ambrose speak a little bit already, but he is also joined with his colleague Oyuki Yofisa, who's the Program Manager of Economic Empowerment at NUDIPU, Allison Thornburn, who is the co-founder of the Barrier-Free Finance Initiative that was mentioned earlier, Margaret Namazi, the Transformation Manager, and Jesse Focal-Point from Opportunity Bank Uganda Limited, and then Martin Seguya, the Chief Manager of Personal Banking at Centenary Bank. So welcome to all of you, and thanks so much for the great introduction regarding the barriers and opportunities for better serving persons with disabilities. So my first question, especially to our colleagues in Uganda, is we'd love to understand more your own experiences trying to advance formal financial services for persons with disabilities in your own organization. So maybe I'll ask Martin, if you wouldn't mind sharing your response to that. And each of you have about 2 minutes to respond to this since we want to stay within time. So Martin, would you mind sharing your perspective?
Thank you very much, Bobby Gray. Martin is my name once again. I think the outlook of financial services from the perspective of Centenary Bank takes about 3 phases. One, when you consider the type of location where the disabled person is or the person with disabilities are, the nature of formality, whether they are formal or they're informal. You're looking at whether they are rural or urban, because over time we've discovered that their behavior is certainly different. So for the formal and in urban, I think those we have found the interaction with persons that are in this category more or less fluid, because the level of exposure has been or is much wider, and the expression is easy. But now the issues actually turn to those that are more informal and mostly in the rural kind of space, because then the exposure is a little bit limited, and there is that fear for financial institutions because of the limited exposure, and their fears are because they have not interfaced with banking organizations and persons that can speak to them about the availability of products and services for them. So in that space, that is where we had a lot of work to do, partnering with the local entities, local partners, local bodies, NGOs, especially in the space that that engages with persons with disabilities, to create that awareness that products are available for them. They can actually be able to enter into that market for them to have their products bought. They can be refinanced to increase the level or the scaling of their products and the businesses that they're doing. And we have seen over time an increase, a marginal increase to their ability to take up products in the bank, and also for them to outturn their products to be scaled in terms of more production. I think that has mostly been the turning point for those that are in the rural and mostly informal. But for the urban, I think our experience has been great. We've not had any challenges regarding to relating to them and even being able to have them access the banking services. We have We have improved pretty much what has already been raised by our team here, Ambrose, the things that he has talked about. A couple of them we put in place. And we think that the issue is mostly in the rural and the informal. That is where we still have a lot of work. Thank you, Bobby.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you, Martin. Before we go to NUDIPU, I'd love to hear from Margaret at Oval, given you're also a financial institution. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective on this.
Okay, thank you so much, Bobby. It's unfortunate I won't be able to put on my camera because of network issues, but I want to share the experience of Opportunity Bank. Opportunity Bank has been serving persons with disabilities since 2015 through the partnership that we have with NUDIPU, Association of Microfinance Institutions, and other organizations that work with persons with disabilities. And for over the years, cumulatively, we have served over 30 persons with disabilities in both loans, those who are accessing loans, and those that are opening accounts. One thing that we have noted on those that have borrowed from us, which is very interesting, is that their payment or their rate of repayment is really good. I think is if we have those that over 30 days in arrears, it's like 1%. So which is different for even from others that clients we serve, and which is really interesting for everyone to note that persons with disabilities are good and well committed when it comes to paying back their loans. But even in terms of saving, we've seen that there are those that are really committed to saving, although there are those that are struggling. One thing that we have noted along the journey is that if you sit and expect that the persons with disabilities will come because you have a financial product for them, especially those in the rural areas that are maybe who are less exposed, who have not gone to school, they will not come. So for us, what we did at Opportunity Bank, when we realized that they were not coming, we decided to go where they were. And when we went there, we trained them in financial literacy. We trained them on how to use the financial products to build their confidence and mindset to know that the banks are not for the rich, the banks are not for the other able-bodied people, but they are for everyone. We even had to carry people to just come and experience the bank environment so that they can gain confidence and be able to bring their money. So that is one thing that is really like Martin has said, that working with those that are in rural areas and are less exposed, there's a lot that is needed to be done than people who are maybe who are employed or who are more exposed in urban areas. So that is one of the things that we noted. Then another thing that is very important is commitment from management and buy-in from management and the staff. Management should be able or should be ready to hold the vision of disability inclusion and be committed to achieving the goals of this. Otherwise, if they are not, it will not work. And also committed in terms of resources, in terms of both human resource and financial resources, because much as it may not look to be an area that requires a lot of investment, but you realize definitely you need money to do research, you need money to train clients, you need money to improve the infrastructure, to make it accessible. So if management is not ready to commit resources, it may be very difficult. And the buy-in from staff is also very important. Otherwise, they will frustrate all the efforts. Then another thing which is also very important is to work in partnership with other organizations. Being a financial institution, you may not be able to do everything. Especially for us, we benefited a lot when we worked with NUDIPU and AMFU, because we leveraged on the work they had already done of mobilizing these people in groups, preparing them, showing them how to save and to start a business. So it was very easy for us when we went in there, because we are just now doing the banking linkage. And that's what I would maybe emphasize to the financial institutions, that let us stick to our work of linkage by working with the other non-government organizations that are, or government, that are supporting persons with disabilities in other areas like livelihood training skills, prepare them, and then they are linked to access bank services, the finances, opening accounts. Otherwise, if you want to go in and do everything, you may not be able to do it. Yeah,
Great.
so
Thank
that
you.
is some of the things that we have experienced do happen. And maybe lastly is having them involved, having persons involved, persons with disabilities involved, right from project design up to project evaluation or program evaluation. They need to be involved at each stage. Otherwise, you may do your own things, and at the end of the day, like they say, nothing for us without us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. That was a great response. And I think both Martin and Margaret mentioned the importance of partnership and their collaboration with NUDIPU. So Oyuki, it'd be great to hear your perspective on this and your approach to partnership with financial institutions as well. Oyuki, did you hear my question?
Yes, thank you very
Perfect.
much.
Welcome.
I think my background may not be so good, but my experience is very, very critical. But of course, partly it has been tackled by Margaret. As NUDIPU, it has been very, very important that one, we designed an inclusive economic empowerment program whose major component is ensuring inclusive access to financial services, both informally and formally. And we implemented that program. The second issue is partnering directly with the financial institutions through linkage meetings, and then we draw a schedule of how to reach out to persons with disabilities in the rural setting. That alone builds trust, because persons with disabilities in the rural setting, much as us as from the Organization of Persons with Disabilities could explain the importance of access to formal finance, it was very important for them to hear from the staff from the financial institutions. And that partnership really helped us to build the confidence among persons with disabilities to go for formal financial services. However, in the years that I've worked implementing a financial inclusion intervention, a number of things I've come across. One of them is that still there's need to deal with the fear. Ambrose touched it. There's still fear on formal financial products. And that takes a lot of effort to explain, to change the perception of the person with disabilities, especially in the rural setting. The other issue, of course, Ambrose touched is the issue of distance to the service points. And that is so much related with the associated cost, the mobility costs, but also costs associated, like the charges, like he did mention. So that is another area. Actually, our call to the supply side is to deal very much with the working out to reduce the costs persons with disabilities involved in traveling from wherever they live to access financial institutions. The other issue that is very critical is the negative attitudes. Of course, this has been mentioned. Still, there's a lot of work to deal with the attitudes, both on the side of the staff of financial institutions, but also dealing with the low esteem among persons with disabilities on managing, especially the debt, the loans as they access from the financial institutions. And then there's this issue of designing new products vis-a-vis making the existing products inclusive. That is one thing that needs very clear decision. Because as we promote inclusion, our desire is to have inclusive products. Maybe if we particularly design products, particularly that targets persons with disabilities, we may not explain that as inclusion. What we desire is universal design of the products so that not only persons with disabilities can access, but all other persons that have difficulties in accessing. And then lastly, my other issue is this issue of the complaint of the harsh treatment that persons with disabilities fear, but also that is so much related with the bad experience that some of them have experienced. One time I was introducing access to formal finance to one of the saving groups in the community, and one member had to get up and tell me that you are introducing here banking institutions, but my neighbor gave birth from the bush because they were following up her to pay back the loan. So don't bring trouble to us. And I took time to explain, to change the mindset. So some of the things to deal with is how flexible we can work to reach out to clients with the disabilities. And
Thank
then,
you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Maybe my last one is this issue of, it is quicker, from my personal experience, it's more quicker to promote products to individuals with disabilities. Actually, it's easier to promote to individuals with disabilities other than groups. That comes from the experience, especially when we worked with the Opportunity Bank. It takes long for a group to decide to get a loan from the financial institutions, but it's quicker for individuals to take a decision. So if we convince individuals, they are quicker to make decisions of uptaking the products. Thank you.
Thank you, Oyuki.
Great.
Oh, back to you, Bobby.
Yeah, no, given we're short on time, I'd like to invite the same panelists just quickly, because I think you've addressed a lot of the different opportunities to better reach persons with disabilities. Can you reflect on any efforts that you've made to reach youth with disabilities, and maybe each of you 1 minute to kind of respond to that question? Maybe Martin, I'll let you go first.
Thank you very much, Bobby. For the youth, I think the youth have similarity in terms of the way the world has been brought to them. We call them the Gen Zs, and so their outlook of the way things appear is quite different. They are quite receptive to very many things. Like I said, especially these in the urban. In the urban, I think it is flawless, because what we've been able to do, introducing digital channels to them so that they can be able to onboard themselves, self-onboard, because a couple of them have devices that they can use. The second thing that we've also been able to do is to introduce the awareness that staff of banks can actually interface with all levels of staff. We go to these institutions. We've been going to institutions that are especially managing the disabled persons, all staffs with disabilities, because they're of different kinds. And in that space, to break into that market, corporate social responsibility has been one of the things the bank has embarked on a yearly basis. And we have decentralized it to all our branches to have a presence by offering what would ideally be natural for a good working relation. Then the third thing that we have also done is to create financial literacy sessions that empower them to actually break into business in terms of entrepreneurship, but also started on the journey of formalizing some of the projects that they are doing to cause them to earn a living, because that is the other area which is of concern. Earning something that can sustain them. And then last but not least, one of the things that we have also broken into is close partnerships or collaborations with umbrella associations or groups that bring these youth that have any form of disabilities to create possibilities for them in form of what we've already talked about, in form of supported machinations that can enable them to move to the next stage of life. Pretty much our efforts in that area have been strong, and we are committed, the bank is committed to that on a yearly basis. And I think it is the way to go to be able to bring the financial abilities, financial literacy, and most importantly, to enable them know that they can fit in every society. And in the bank, what we actually do, last but not least, we have a couple of our colleagues who fall in within this segment. They are staff with different forms of disabilities, and even when we go out to the field to interface with these special groups, they actually are motivators to them, to show them that things can be done, and they can actually also utilize the same opportunities given to them by ourselves and even the partners that we're working with to get to the next level of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So I think, I hate to do this, but because we haven't been able to hear from Allison yet, I'm going to kind of bypass Margaret and Oyuki for the moment, and apologies for that. But Allison, to bring you in before the close of the meeting, you know, we've heard some really great examples from Uganda. I wonder how you can relate that to other best practices that you've seen globally.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. That's a great question. And I want to, first of all, talk about best practices for financial services providers, and then, if possible, widen it a little to the overall ecosystem. So a lot of what's been said really resonates with best practices we've seen. So I think at organizational level for financial services providers, you know, for instance, organizations like Fundación Paraguaya, we've seen, you know, who have this organizational commitment to disability inclusion and as part of their mission rather than add-on. And rather than, you know, creating special products for people with disabilities, they focus on enabling access to their existing products and services by integrating inclusion practices across their operations. So, you know, that would include branch accessibility, accessible information, accessible training, servicing adaptations, and staff training, you know, a lot of the things we've heard here. And they also focus on inclusive outreach through long-term partnerships with organizations with people with disabilities, and also appointing inclusion promoters, as they call them, to proactively engage with people with disabilities in the community and, you know, overcome their distrust. So I think one thing we haven't covered, though, is around data. We do see that, you know, actually collecting and using data from people with disabilities is key to really understand their needs and design strategies to address them, as well as measuring impact. So a great example we've seen is Comida in Indonesia. So they use the Washington Group short set questions to collect disability data from their clients. And this has really helped them to identify people with disabilities within their client base and tailor their services to meet their needs. And they also carry out participative research with women with disabilities to co-create solutions, which includes building in digital accessibility in their mobile app development. So I think there's some great examples there, and that resonates with what we heard. We also have seen examples of you know, more tailored products and services that are quite holistic to meet needs of people with disabilities. So, for instance, BRAC Myanmar offers a microloan product alongside financial literacy training and entrepreneurship support. And it offers the option to appoint a co-borrower for people with disabilities who don't have collateral, and also to use a voucher to postpone one loan repayment, which helps to manage things like, you know, health emergencies or the financial shocks, which are often experienced more frequently by people with disabilities. And another example, which comes from the UK, is called SIPSTAR, which is a debit card process, a debit card product with a mobile app. And this is designed for specifically for facilitating safe and independent spending by people with dementia, who are, a particularly excluded group. And this has features like, real-time transaction notifications, user-defined limits on cash withdrawals and transaction spending. And also it gives the option to appoint a support person to help manage the account via the mobile app. We've also seen some great use of technology to overcome access barriers. So one example is Louis Voice, which is a software plugin developed by a person with visual impairment that basically makes any app fully operable by voice commands only. And that's currently being implemented by a bank in India. So those are at the financial services level. I just wanted to introduce at ecosystem level some of the best practices we've seen of integrating disability inclusion in financial inclusion frameworks. From banks and regulators, we've seen central banks in Egypt, in Ghana and Jordan and other countries implementing regulations mandating accessibility standards for financial services providers. And we've also seen, for instance, the Central Bank of Bangladesh offering a refinancing facility to enable access to collateral-free loans for people with disabilities at concessional interest rates. Ourselves at Barrier Free Finance, we've been collaborating recently with Cerise SPTF to build disability inclusion indicators into their frameworks for social and environmental performance management and their client outcome surveys, and also to develop a disability inclusion guide for financial service providers to sit alongside that. And finally, I just want to applaud the collaboration we've seen here. I mean, cross-sectoral collaboration, we think, is a key best practice. And we've seen that in Indonesia, both in the collaboration between Grameen Foundation and NUDIPU that we've heard today, and also in NUDIPU's collaboration with the Association of Microfinance Institutions in Uganda to advance access to finance for people with disabilities, including building pathways from informal savings groups to formal microfinance services. So, as I say, we really see these practices integrating disability inclusion in existing financial frameworks as key to building really truly inclusive financial systems.
Great. Thank you, Alison. I mean, so I think we've, some of the key words I think that we've heard throughout this presentation is really this importance of partnership, both from a youth organization perspective and a persons with disability perspective, all the way to data, as you just added to the equation. I know that we're really short on time, but Sam, is there any question in the Q&A that maybe we can respond to?
Yeah, there are quite a lot. There's also plenty in the chat. You won't have been able to see it, but because you were running this. But there's a lot of good conversation and contributions there to what's been said, including on data. So I commend that to people. Maybe there's a couple of questions that I've curated here that we could try to cover. So the first one was from Usman from Nigeria, and he says, it seems like all the disabilities mentioned here focus on physical disabilities are invisible disabilities like autism, Asperger's, ADHD also considered. What do we know about this category where people have special talents but are hindered from turning this into businesses? So that's one. There's another one from Phaikdi in Cambodia. I'm sorry, I butchered that name. The research highlights a very concerning level of stigma from FSP staff, even educated ones. What are the most effective advocacy strategies for convincing management to implement mandatory disability training for their frontline staff? So perhaps the second one could go to maybe Martin. And the first one, anyone, or Margaret, yes, quite, or anyone who wants to take the first one. Perhaps if we're okay to run 5 minutes over, we'll deal with them, and then if we can, maybe one more.
Right. So
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Martin will go very fast. Actually, as a policy in Centenary Bank, we have adopted the training, the disability kind of training or preparation for special groups as part of the induction for every new staff And on a regular basis, regular I mean quarterly, we have different stakeholders that are brought to have presentations to all staff. We have an interaction hour that cuts across to all 3,000 staff, where we have different sets of unique special groups that come to bring out the understanding of how special groups should be treated and how to support them to get to different levels of access to financial services. This we have embedded because without it, remember, we are dealing with the Gen Z kind of population, and their outlook on how to treat different kinds of people different from them is different. So it became imperative for the bank to embed it in our training kind of policy. Thank you very much.
Bindi, did you want to come in? I see your hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Martin. I wanted to come in quickly from the financial inclusion NGO perspective in terms of engaging the management of financial institutions to take disability inclusion seriously and reduce stigma. I think one thing that I want to highlight to all of you is the first step is to speak with management and show them the business case as well as the corporate social responsibility case for serving people with disabilities. And so if there is a profit margin or a new market to be reached, that can really convince financial institutions to take steps to work with people with disabilities and train their staff to reduce, to build their awareness of stigma and reduce it.
And Allison,
Great.
did you want to address the question about other types of disabilities? Like, have you seen anything around, like what was mentioned, autism or other non-physical forms?
Yeah, I really agree. I mean, we do see that people with less visible disabilities, in particular psychosocial, intellectual, cognitive disabilities are, really particularly excluded groups. It is something that I think, to be honest, isn't being widely addressed at the moment. We've actually seen some great research coming out of the UK in terms of the needs for, again, spending products for people with learning disabilities. Often it's very difficult for people to access products using complicated passwords. And they often, what ends up happening is that they are forced to use a third person to support them. And that actually compromises their data and privacy and leaves them open to risk of fraud and abuse. So, as I say, I don't think it's an issue that is being widely addressed, though we do see some examples, and the example of the Sibstar product in the UK is also a good one. But one of the things that financial services providers can really do is focus on making their, login processes, identification, verification processes as accessible as possible. Because quite often this is because there's really complicated routines to log in. There isn't a choice between using, captchas that are visual. It can time out before someone's had a chance to process the information and think about it. So I think thinking about all these things would actually really make it be beneficial for people with these types of impairments. But it would also make their accounts much more accessible for many people, older people who aren't particularly digital literate, that could benefit from those improvements. But I think there's also a level of stigma around, people with cognitive, intellectual disabilities, etc. And you do see actual exclusionary clauses, that literally have, eligibility exclusions based on these sorts of diagnoses. So I think there's a lot of awareness raising that needs to be done there about it's around capability of the client. We shouldn't be excluding based on a medical diagnosis.
I think we should probably wrap up there, Bobby. It's very gratifying how many questions have been both in the chat and the Q&A. We didn't get to as many as we would like at all. Perhaps this is the reason to do another one of these. Maybe we need to do something with a focus and make this a series, because there's been a lot of people very interested in this, and there's clearly a lot of questions to cover. So maybe, Bobby, we should talk about that. On that note, I'd like to say thank you to to Alison, Bindi, Bobby, Ambrose, Oyuki, Margaret, Martin for joining this. If you could put the last slide on, please, Bobby. Or Fernando. Fernando put the link to the assessment in the chat, but it's also there. There's also the QR code if you prefer, or I'm sure you could just reach out to the Grameen team if you'd like to learn more. You could contact Amelia at Grameen or me here. We will make sure that if you have questions or connections to any of the people you've heard from today, we'll try and facilitate that, and it will be recorded. But again, thank you everyone for joining and for organizing and taking part in this. It's been great, and we'd like to do more on this topic at the MFP. So with that, I'll say good night and good evening and good afternoon to everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.